Hey people, welcome to the Run Test. It's Kieran here, and we've got a shoe review for you that's been a long time in the making. We are finally going to get to give you our full verdict on the Adidas Adizero Prime X Strung. We've been waiting for some of the other run testers to get their feet in it. I've run a lot in it. Nick and Tom have both had a time to play in it, and we are now about to reveal whether or not we think this is one of the best carbon racers, non-legal carbon racers at that you can buy. Watch on to find out. So some key details then, when it comes to the stack height, that's one of the major details here. The Prime X Strung stack isn't race legal. You're going to have 49.5 mils in the heel, 41 millimeters in the forefoot for an 8.5 mils drop. Weight wise, they weigh 8.9 ounces or 251 grams in a UK men's size 8.5. Price wise, you're going to pay £230 in the UK or $300 in the US. So let's have a really quick whip round of the shoe. If you've not already seen it, it's been out for a while, so you might have seen some details about this before, but essentially what you've got is like the old Prime X, but with some brand new, very clever uppers. That's the strung bit. Up top here, this mesh upper is created it's digitally coded, it's laid down thread by thread. It was a piece of sort of upper technology that we first saw come out of the Future.Tech labs on other shoes. It's the first time that this strung upper has appeared on an Adizero shoe in basically Adidas's kind of racy sector of the market. Now the midsole unit is very similar to the Prime X midsole unit. You've basically got 3 layers of Lightstrike Pro foam. In between that, you've got the carbon energy rods that kind of split and splay under each of your metatarsals under your toes. That's supposed to help you kind of engage that carbon technology in a slightly different way to the kind of foot-long standard plates that you've got. It's the same kind of carbon setup that we've seen inside the Adidas Pro 3. And you've obviously got this whacking great big stack of that Lightstrike Pro foam. It's just shy of 50 millimeters. That means it's not race legal if you're bothered about that. At the elite end, you're certainly not going to be able to wear this to racing. If you're doing regular marathons and you're not really that bothered, then it's up to you whether you wear them or not. So that 8.5 millimeter midsole, as you can see, has a pretty aggressive rocker that wraps around those kind of carbon energy rods. Now those strung uppers it's an interesting kind of feel. There's an interesting kind of texture to these uppers. They're quite rigid. It's quite sort of plasticky kind of feeling, but very different to anything that we've sort of seen or run in before. Something very different indeed. Also, when you look at the heel collar, you've essentially got one of those sort of setups where there's a couple of small cushion pads either side here to sort of hold your heel in place. It rises up quite high, and you've got this kind of fold down tab. It's there to sort of help you get those shoes on, but you can fold it down when you're running. One thing we'll come on to later is that heel rises quite high up the back of the Achilles. So that's one thing to consider when you're racing, but otherwise you've got really sort of minimal sort of heel collaring here and just some very lightweight soft cushion pads to kind of hold that foot in place. Flip them over, and on the underside you've got some Continental rubber. Again, big covering in the forefoot. You can see where the carbon energy rods, they've got cutaways here. That saves a bit away, but also shows you the technology inside. You've got some more Continental rubber placements in the heel in those kind of high impact zones for grip and durability. You've also got a big kind of cutaway here on this side of the shoe. Again, where you can see those kind of carbon energy rods running down through the front. That cutaway, again, you're sort of saving a bit of weight in the overall kind of use of the midsole. And if you look to the back, there's also a heel bevel here that's leaning out to the lateral side. Inside, you've got a tongue that's sort of stitched in down the bottom there. It's not quite gusseted, but it is stitched in a bit further down. It's very, very thin. It's quite broad. The idea is that's kind of a wrap. You've got a little bit of extra cushioning here where the laces will be locked down, take away a bit of lace pinch. And then you've got a pretty standard sort of lacing setup, but with very kind of thin and light but traditional laces.
So the fit of the Prime X has been interesting for me, put it that way. On length, it's true to size. It's my normal size in all shoes, which is different to the Adidas Pro 3, which I wear half a size up. This is a good amount of room in the toe box, nice hold around the midfoot. Heel, not great for me. I have had heel rub, but quite nasty heel rub today on my longer run, and it's this design where you have the padding either side with not much in the middle, and it's just the same as the Adidas Pro 3, but that clenches a bit tighter, I feel, around the heel, and this is just that little bit loose. And yeah, I've had real heel rub, even whilst heel locking the shoe, so a bit of a problem for me. I think this design crops up in a few shoes, and I don't really get it. I don't think it works that well. It certainly doesn't work that well for me, but I don't think it's been such a big deal for the other testers who have used the shoe.
Okay, so for me in the Adidas Prime X Strung, I would say true to size based on the fit, but I do have a major issue with heel rub at the back of the shoe. So I'm not sure if the shoe is just slightly too small for me, but I do think it's largely to do with the design of the heel and not so much the fit of the shoe. So I probably would stick true to size in this shoe, but I do get major heel rub and it's not something I get very often.
So when it came to fit, I ran in a regular UK 8.5, and I found no problem at all with fit. In fact, this is exactly the fit that I wanted in the Adidas Pro 3 that I found a bit fussy and a bit difficult. The uppers on this, the strung uppers, I think fix all of that. I thought they were plenty roomy enough. I got good lace lockdown. I know some of the other run testers had a problem with kind of heel rubbing. I didn't have any of that. I found that they kind of hugged nicely with just enough room. And if I was recommending, I would go true to size in this shoe.
So I've done about 60k in the Adidas Prime X Strung so far, and it's a really interesting shoe to run in. On paper, it looks like my perfect shoe. I love loads of cushioning. I do a lot of faster training runs. I like to have a bit of bounce in my shoe. And it's got all of these things. It's a very nice shoe if you like a lot of cushioning and you want to train at a faster pace for consistent training miles. But what I have found about the shoe is that my favourite run that I've done in this shoe is a general daily run, consistent pace run, not a fast run necessarily. It's more those runs where you're going out and just clocking up some daily training miles. What I find when I wear this shoe is that I just end up getting a bit faster. It just feels very efficient. It feels like it's making the run easier. And by the time I've done those runs, I get home and I go, well, actually, I've ended up doing quite a faster run than what I expected to do. I've also raced in this shoe, so I did Eastbourne Half Marathon in this. And to be honest, I wasn't quite sure what to expect from it. But I didn't really enjoy it for racing in. This 50mm midsole drop, it's just too much. No shoe needs that much midsole. And that's coming from a man who loves cushioning, like max cushioning shoes. But I think the reason with this shoe is that it's got a really thin base on it. And even though it's really high, it's almost like you're running on stilts because there's no real support either side of this heel section. And when I've been doing like 10k runs, 12k runs, it's been fine because I've not been tired. I've been watching where I'm going, and it's not been an issue. I can still feel it being a little bit wobbly, but I'm in control of those runs. When I did the half marathon in this shoe, I was getting really tired. It was quite a tough half marathon. I wasn't in a particularly good state at the time. I was pretty tired, and there was a really big hill on the half marathon. And I did find that in the later bits of the race, I really started to feel little holes in the road, rocks that I'd step on, and it did feel a bit wobbly in some of those. And I think that's the major issue with this shoe. I think it's great fun to run in, and if you're in control and you're keeping an eye on the road and everything, it's a fantastically fun, enjoyable shoe to run in. But if you're not paying attention to the road, you're getting tired, maybe you're on slightly uneven terrain, it's a bit of a risky shoe to try, and it's a little bit of a niche shoe for me in that respect. And although I do enjoy it, I only use this for certain runs. I think it's a very good tempo training shoe. If you're trying to maintain a consistent pace, maybe a little bit below your marathon pace, I think it works really well for that, as long as you're paying attention to it and you're on a really flat course. I run in a park near my house, and that park is quite uneven at certain points. I don't use this shoe for those runs because I just don't trust it on the park ground. Now the outsole of it is actually really good. It's this Continental rubber outsole, so it can handle trickier terrain, but it just wouldn't go on an uneven terrain with it. But other than that, I do think it's a solid, enjoyable shoe. I just think that it's a bit of a niche shoe, and I think a lot of people, if you gave this to 100 people, I think quite a lot of those people would go, I don't really like it, I don't feel comfortable in it. Definitely wouldn't get this if you're a beginner, but it's a fun shoe, just a very expensive fun shoe.
The Prime X is a long time coming for me. It was a shoe I was pretty excited to test out. It's not one that ever really cropped up on my radar initially, just because it wasn't a legal shoe and I didn't really see it taking off to the extent it has, but I was wrong on that. People love this shoe, so I was looking forward to giving it a go. Only other like max stack carbon shoe that, a legally high stack I've tried was the New Balance Super Comp Trainer, which I didn't really rate that highly. It was quite a heavy shoe, a bit clumpy, and it was fun and bouncy, but this is a different beast entirely. This is very fast and doesn't feel as heavy as it is. It's still quite a heavy shoe, but you're looking about 15-20 grams heavier than things like the Adidas Pro 3 and the Alpha Fly in my UK size 9, but it's got so much bounce and propulsion you don't really notice that. And because it's got quite a narrow profile, it looks even narrower from the top down than the Adidas Pro 3. It feels quite light and nimble, and then you've got that fantastic bounce. So first run this year, I took it down the track and did a couple of mile reps that was sandwiching a long 200 session, like doing 2 sets of 8x200 at around my mile pace. So not like all out 200s, but consistent ones with short recoveries, and it just felt really good. Like, it's actually, we were moving quite fast. We were running like 34 second 200s, and it just felt like I was cruising along. No real ground feel or impact, but very fast, propulsive feeling. And then took it for like a nice progression run where I went from an easy pace down to quite a fast pace by the end. And it was very similar actually to the Alphafly 2 in that regard. It was when I hit those steady paces, which is done on effort for me, or heart rate, the pace getting spat out was higher than in other shoes. It really is like effortlessly fast and bouncy when you're running at those quite controlled paces still. So yeah, after those first few runs in the shoe, I was really enjoying it. And then I took it out today for a harder progression 10K. So just out for a hard 10K in the Adidas Prime X Strung. I'm hiding behind this hedge because it's incredibly windy today, but I think I've hopefully got a route that will mostly be crosswinds, so I shouldn't have too many headwinds. Ideally a couple of tailwinds will crop up, but I think it's going to be mostly crosswinds. The plan is to do a progression 10K, so 3K at 345 a K, 3K at 335 a K, then 3K at 325 a K, and just kick the last K if I've got much left. So it'll be a good progression through my paces, so from kind of a steady pace through marathon pace, half marathon pace, down towards 10K, 5K pace at the end. So it should be a really good test of the shoe, how it handles those different speeds. I've hopefully got a nice straight line out and back course to try and avoid too many turns in this big shoe. But yeah, I really enjoyed using it yesterday, so I'm quite excited to see how it goes today. Just praying the wind doesn't switch direction. Held on, and time-wise, that went very well. Like, hit all the splits quite nicely. Didn't have much of a kick, but did manage to get sub 320 for the last K there. Wind, as always, seemed to be everywhere rather than in one direction than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, all in all, good run, and performance was really impressive from the shoe. Like, that is a run I do quite often during my training, like especially during marathon cycles, and it's one I usually mess up. It normally doesn't go that well. Normally I'm clinging on for the 3K at 325 and then have no kind of kick in the last one and just kind of jog it in almost. But today felt really strong throughout. The shoe is really bouncy. As I increased the pace throughout the run, you could just feel it getting more and more bouncy. So noticeably, particular when I stepped up from like about 335 per K to 325 per K, just suddenly got that big, even more booming bounce out of the shoe. Like, well, it's outrageously bouncy. It really does deliver a lot of propulsion. And then in the last K, yeah, trying to kick with the shoe this big was a bit hard, a bit dodgy. I had to turn one corner and it wasn't ideal, but it's still very, very fast. Like, certainly for that kind of pace, I'd probably be preferring one of the lighter carbon shoes out there for the kick. But all in all, don't have any faults with performance on that run today. Do have a fault with the heel, got pretty nasty heel rub on my right foot. I could really feel it going at about 6K. I knew I had 4 to go and then a jog home. And it has ripped a bit of skin off the back of my Achilles there. And I even heel locked it straight away when I started the run today, thinking I was a bit worried about it, and that didn't seem to help at all. So otherwise, yeah, all good today. Very, very impressed with how the shoe performed.
Now, my run test, I've run north of 200 miles in this shoe, and I've done pretty much everything you can do in it. I've raced marathons, I've raced half marathons, I've done all out 5Ks, I've done some slower runs, I've done all out miles, I've run a very quick, I think my second fastest ever mile in this shoe. I've done some plods. Basically, you name it, I've thrown it at this shoe. I've run mainly on roads and pavements and decent surfaces, but sometimes I've been on river paths as well to test the overall kind of stability of the shoe. Yeah, so I've basically logged everything I can at this shoe in run testing. I've also run in some pretty wet and wild conditions too. Now, the Prime X Strung are designed primarily for racing marathons, and over the 26.2, I ran, I think, like a just over 3 hour marathon not long after coming back from the Danube in these shoes, and I thought they were a joy to run, and I really enjoyed them. They kind of feel lively and racy from the moment that you put them on. I think you're getting a real amount of oomph from that kind of combination of the energy rods and the Lightstrike Pro foam. They feel like energetic, and they're agile, and they've got punch, and they've got everything you want in a big marathon race shoe. Once you're moving, that combination of the carbon rods, the foam and the rocker, they produce a pronounced kind of propulsion. There's spring, there's roll, there's efficiency. And the big stack of Lightstrike Pro foam also definitely helps, I think, tired legs stay fresher deeper into marathons as well. That was particularly the case when I ran the Abingdon Marathon. Now, that marathon that I did was also on a torrentially rainy day, and we went through some off-road bits, so the grip was put to a real good test. The one thing I will say, they took on quite a lot of water, but they dried out quite quickly. Grip was great, even in some very, very tricky conditions. Cornering, all of that I thought was really good. That Continental rubber does a really good job in that was terrible conditions. Now, as I said, the other thing I did was an all-out mile test. The only shoe that I've run a quicker mile in is the Nike Alphafly X% 2. That was on a 400 metre park loop. Again, tight cornering, and I think that's one area Cornering is an area where these shoes maybe struggle a little bit. I think on tight cornering, you can feel like your foot has maybe moved off that kind of bed of Lightstrike Pro foam, and you find yourself for the next few steps having to almost readjust to get yourself back and engaging in the right way, that foam and those rods. See, I'd say it's not the most stable, it's not the best in terms of kind of foothold and security, particularly on kind of tighter, twisty courses. Now, I know some of the other run testers have had problems with this heel rubbing during their marathons, which have kind of left them, it's a really sore one. That starts to rub, that's a real pain. It can be a kind of race stopper. I didn't have any of that at all. In my tests, these were absolutely fine. So I don't know whether that's just foot shape, what it is, but one thing to consider, you might get rubbing, you might not. But for me, one of the major differences here, and one of the benefits over the Adidas Pro 3, was in the Adidas Pro 3, there's quite a lot of sort of tightness around that big toe knuckle that makes them, I think, a slightly less comfortable shoe to put on. These strung uppers, I think, fix that problem. And it's almost like if you had the strung uppers on an Adidas Pro 3 footbed midsole unit, I think there would be a much better shoe. And I'm hoping to see strung uppers come across sort of more shoes in the Adidas range. I think it's a real kind of step up in terms of overall comfort. But for me, yeah, overall run test, I really enjoyed running in this shoe. It was a really happy one to race in. It's definitely one that I go to when I'm not really bothered whether or not I'm adhering to the legal stack height in different races. It's just a fun shoe to run in as well. I think it's lively and enjoyable. It's one of those that's just a joy to run in when you're going out to try and do something a bit faster.
So the Prime X is a very impressive shoe, I think, all round. It is really, really fast, fun to run in, very bouncy, not as unstable as I feared. I think I've mostly because I've done just basically fast runs in it. I think on a cool down after I'd run that fast track session, it did feel a bit wobbly at first, but once you get into sync with it, it's okay. Have to be a little bit more aware of what's around you, but even with quite a narrow heel in this high stack, I was surprised by how the stability just didn't seem too much of a concern when I was running fast. Like during the 10K today, I was taking some quite sharp corners and wasn't really worrying about it any more than I would with other shoes. So yeah, it's really good. It's really, with all that, Adidas has made use of that 50mm stack and they've made it a very propulsive shoe that just feels really good underfoot. The caveats here is the heel rub, which I don't know, with other shoes when I've had this problem, I've been able to get around it with tight heel locks, and that just didn't happen today. I had a nice tight heel lock. There wasn't any rubbing really before I started, but it still really did start to hurt a bit by the end of that 10K. So that's a concern for me. The other caveat obviously is an illegally high stack shoe. So I just wouldn't consider using it myself. Now, I'm not judging anyone who does, I will say that. I wouldn't mind being beaten by someone wearing these shoes, but it's just something that doesn't really occur to me to use a 50mm stack shoe when the limits are set at 40. So, and in all the races I've done since the shoe was out, I've never really seen it worn around the people around me during races. So that's it. I wouldn't buy this as a racing shoe myself just because it is 50mm, and I think there are so many really good 40mm shoes that I wouldn't really be, I don't really feel like you're missing out. I do think it's a really good shoe, but at the same time, I don't think you're getting a performance boost here compared to the 40mm shoes that are a bit lighter, things like the Alphafly 2 and the Adidas Pro 3. So yeah, each to their own on this front. I understand that if you're not really elite, you don't really have to worry about these regulations so much, but I'm not an elite, and it wouldn't, like I said, it wouldn't really occur to me to go and use this shoe because it is a breach of the regulations. However, you're comparing purely on performance, I think this is very similar to the Alphafly 2 for me. The Alphafly is more stable and wider at the heel for sure, but I think they have quite similarly propulsive rides. I really get a nice feeling from them. It feels like they can help you maintain your pace deep into races, maybe not fantastic for all-out shorter races because they are so big, but very good, powerful, propulsive cruising shoes. And it does feel similar to the Adidas Pro 3 to me, just with that extra bit of oomph. And the Adidas Pro 3 feels a little bit firmer underfoot because of the lower stack that you then feel the carbon energy rods in the shoe a little bit more, but they've got similar feeling from the foams as you'd expect. The same foam with that nice propulsive feeling. You just get a bit more of it here. Trade-off being that it is a little bit narrower at the heel, a little bit less stable at the heel than the Adidas Pro 3. And again, I don't think there's a big jump in performance here. It is a little bit more propulsive, but the trade-off is weight. Trade-off is a little bit of nimbleness, and I think overall it evens out. So I would be going for the Pro 3 as the legal shoe if I was buying it. So that is the thing for me. I don't really know why I would buy this shoe. I wouldn't race in this. Training, it's a lovely shoe to train. It really protects the legs well. You're going to get a lot of protection there, but I don't think it's a massive step up on what you get from carbon shoes already. And if you're going to buy a shoe like this, then I would buy a legal version that I could also race in. And also I probably would train in something a lot lower stack just to get a bit more ground feel for the most part. But if you are happy to race in it and you don't get the heel rubber shoe, you have got a very good long distance racing shoe here. It's a very powerfully propulsive shoe that does feel really good when you're running fast. But I don't think it's a step up on what you get from a 40mm shoe. So yeah, I'd go for the legal version myself.
So my really quick verdict on the Adidas Prime X Strung is this. This is basically, for me, a shoe that really gets close to rivaling the Alphafly Next% 2 as one of the best marathon race shoes going. You know, they're everything that you want in a speed shoe. They're light, they're snappy, they're responsive across any distance, I think up to the marathon distance and even beyond. But they're definitely at their best when you're running with your best locked in, sort of dialed in race pace form. Those uppers are definitely superior to anything I've run in a carbon race shoe from Adidas before. I'd say it has as much punch as the Alphafly Next% 2. It's got better comfort than the Adidas Pro 3. It's much cheaper than the Saucony Endorphin Elite. I think the Adidas Prime X Strung is really right up there with the best.
So my verdict on the Adidas Prime X Strung is that it's a great shoe for a certain reason. I love running in this shoe for certain runs. It's so enjoyable, so efficient, so bouncy and sort of takes the brunt of the run off of you so that you can really maintain a consistent pace without putting in more effort. I think the problem is it's an expensive shoe for what essentially is quite a niche option that is probably going to be a problem for some people. If you're a beginner, I definitely want to go for this shoe because it is really high and really doesn't help with stability if you're on uneven terrain. But also, if you're not sure about the type of runner that you are, so if you're a pronator or something like that, I wouldn't wear this shoe because it is a bit of a risky shoe to wear. And I run in a lot of carbon plate shoes, but this 50mm stack is a very high stack, and I've been running for a long time. I never really have any problems with instability or anything like that, but I do find this shoe a bit of a risky one to run in, and you really got to pay attention to it when you're running in it.
So there you have it. That has been our multi-tester review of the Adidas Adizero Prime X Strung. You've had to wait for it a while. Hope you've enjoyed it. Have you run in these shoes already? Let us know in the comments how you found them. Do you agree with what we've said? Have you found the heel rubs as well? We'd love to hear about that because that's clearly a problem with some runners. Does this beat the Alphafly Next% 2? What's your favourite carbon race shoe? So many questions. Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell. If you're interested in other carbon race shoes, then there is a video on the channel that you will enjoy coming up around about now. Otherwise, it's been a real pleasure as ever to talk to you about these shoes, and we hope to see you again soon on the Run Testers. Happy running, people. Good luck with whatever it is that you're trying to achieve out there.